In this part of the Vehicle AI tutorial series, we will create a path for AI so that it can drive around the track. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is make a path for AI. Now the reason for making a path for AI is because without a path for AI, our AI won't know where the turns are or the straights are of our track, and so the AI can't really drive around the track because it, well, doesn't know how the track looks. So the AI needs a path to guide it around the track. Now the path isn't going to directly control the AI. The AI is still going to have to throttle and brake like a normal player, but it's going to use the path as a guidance to do so. There's a lot of ways to make paths in Unreal Engine, but my preferred is to use a spline. A spline is essentially just a path really, and it has a lot of functions built into Unreal Engine, which makes it really useful because when we want to create our path, we can just call a few functions built into the spline, and that will just make it really easy to interact with. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and make our path with a spline. To do that, we're going to open up our content browser, and if you're in your content folder, you just want to go to your AI folder. We're going to right click and create a new blueprint class. It's going to be of type actor. We're going to call this pp_AI path. Should be a pretty good name. Going to press enter to save that, and we're going to double click to open it up. And once that's opened up, we're going to go ahead and dock it to the top of the window. Once it's docked, we're going to go ahead and add the spline to this blueprint. Now, a spline is a component inside of Unreal Engine, so to add it, we're going to go to the top left under components, we're going to click on add, and we're going to type in spline. There's going to be two options, spline mesh and spline. We're going to be picking spline. Spline mesh is not the one we want, so we're going to just pick the normal spline. We're going to compile and save because that's really all we need for now. We might open this up later, just a bit later, but for now we're going to close that. Now that it's closed, we're going to go ahead and add our path to our level so we can start building out the path. To do that, we're going to open up our content browser. We're going to drag the BP path into the level, and here we have our path. Now the first thing I'm going to do is just lift it a bit from the ground. I find that the AI struggles to read the path if it isn't up from the ground. Now that it's up from the ground, we're going to go ahead and work on it. Now, the first thing we want to do is make sure that this path is in the center of the road. Now, this is actually pretty hard to do from a 3D view. So what I like to do, and what I suggest we do, is we go to the top left, and under the save icon, we click on this perspective button, and we change it to top orthographic view. Now, if we zoom out and move our camera, you can see now we have a top-down view of the track with our path over here. Now, the thing is that this is still kind of hard to read because there's so many lines everywhere. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the top left, right next to the top icon here, and click on the wireframe, and change the view mode to lit. And now we can actually see our track top-down, and it's really easy to work with. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is move the path to the center of the road, and it's not going to line up fully. So something you can do is you can go to the top right, and here at this grid icon, you can click that off. This turns off snapping, which means that you have very fine control of moving stuff in Unreal Engine. We'll turn it on later, but for now we'll use it to line up the path to the center. Now, this doesn't really have to be precise. With this path, you can be off by a bit and your AI will still be good. Okay, let's go ahead and build on this spline. Now, how do we build on the spline? What we do is we click on the second point over here. I actually misclicked, but if we click on the second point over here, if you hold Alt on your keyboard and drag away, you create a new point. So every time you hold Alt and drag away, you create a new point. Once you've created a point, the moment you click on that point, you'll see these 2 points around it. This is called the tangent of the spline point, and if I click on this point over here and adjust it, I can adjust the curve of the spline at a certain point. So this is how we'll be making turns, we'll be cleaning it up by changing the tangent. But that's really all you need to make this path, so I'm just going to go ahead and undo that. And now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain how to do the first 3 turns. And I'm probably going to time-lapse the rest or cut it based on how I'm feeling in the editing software. But yeah, I'll show you the first 3 turns because the rest of the turns are quite similar to do. Now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and start with the first turn. So we'll take the second point over here and move it to the start of the first turn. Now what's great about this track is that it is actually built with splines. So there's these green parts that intersect with the road over here. And this is actually where you have to put your spline points to have the ideal result for your path. Now, I'm going to kind of explain how you can do this without this guidance, but this is really helpful on its own, so I'm also going to heavily rely on it. But we're going to just line up this point at the start of the turn. And what I usually like to do, and what works here, is for these bigger type of turns, or turns that are not precisely 180 or not precisely 90 degrees, like this is kind of lopsided a bit. For these, I usually like to add 3 points, so one at the beginning of the turn, one at the about center of the turn, and one at the exit of the turn. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to hold Alt and drag to about the center of the turn. Then we're going to hold Alt and drag to about the exit of the turn. And now what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to adjust the tangents yet. I'm not going to go ahead and fix this, because usually the more points you add over here, it kind of messes with these points over here. So personally, I just like to add the points before I start shaping the road. Anyway, let's go ahead and do the second turn. So I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard and drag to the start of the next turn. And now this turn is very similar to the one we just did. It's kind of lopsided, or actually it's kind of perfect really. But it's the same concept. We're going to do a point in the center, and then finally we're going to do a point in the exit. Now, we're going to hold Alt, create a new point at the beginning of the next turn. Now I'm going to count these two as one big turn. So I'm going to put that at the center point, and that's at the exit point. So we're going to add points over there. And now this is how far I'm going to show you precisely how to do. The rest I'm going to time-lapse or do off camera. Anyway, let's go ahead and fix up the first turn, because as you can see, this is not even close to the actual turn. So how do we fix this? Well, we're going to click at the beginning of our turn, and this tangent, what we're going to do is we're going to line it up with the beginning straight of the turn. So as you can see, we start off with a straight, and so we're going to line up the tangent to be with that straight. And now you can see it's a straight line entering. And that kind of fixed that part over there. But now we're going to go to the exit and do the same thing. We're going to make it in line with the exit. So we're going to move it. And now that is kind of in line with the exit. As you can see, there's kind of this bump over here, which is not what we want. The reason for that is because, as you can see, this exit point is way too far along the curve over here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to move the tangent point down a bit. And now you can see it lines up way better. Yeah, there's this small gap, but it's not really going to cause much of any problems. If it does, it's going to be very minor. But anyway, now that we have the first turn out of the way, let's go ahead and do the second turn. It's about the same. So the first point, we line up with the starting straight. And as you can see, it's kind of bumpy there. So what we're going to do, reduce the size of that. And yeah, this is lined up pretty well. I'm going to go to the exit point. I misclicked, so I'm going to go to my outliner, select the AI path again. And I'm going to line this up with the exit straight we have here. Again, a bit of a hump here, so we're just going to reduce it a bit. And yeah, that turn is pretty well. Now we're going to go over here and straighten this with the beginning of the turn. I'm not going to adjust the length yet. Let's see how this works over here. I'm going to rotate this one though, and I'm going to rotate it in a straight line like this. The reason is because this is a 180, and so the exit is about the same as the beginning. So I'm doing a straight line here. Now, this is kind of still not good. So I think in this case, I'm going to adjust the center point a bit. So about here, and that's pretty good. Then here at the exit, I'm going to expand it a bit. So yeah, and something like that is pretty good. Now, what you can do is if something doesn't feel right, just play around with these tangents. Sometimes you'll have to mess around with the middle one a bit more. maybe sometimes with the exit, but you'll kind of see it take shape. It's not going to be too confusing. You can kind of guesstimate where it's going to, how it's going to look by adjusting a certain tangent. If you can't do it now, you'll probably be able to do it in the future. It's just something you'll develop kind of an eye for. But now that I have that out of the way, I'm going to time-lapse or cut the rest of this, so see you guys after this. Okay, and now I've fully built out the path for the AI, but now we have a problem here. So here's my ending point, and here is the start of the spline. Now the problem is that it isn't connected. So the moment the AI wants to go around the track, it can kind of get a bit buggy because, well, it doesn't know it's a full loop or full closed track. So how do we fix this? Well, once you have the BP AI selected, the BP AI path, then under the details panel, you want to click on the spline component and tick on closed loop. And now we have a fully closed track overall. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to top left and change from top to perspective view. And this is my fully completed track. It's not 100% perfect, but it will definitely suffice for this tutorial. And yeah, I think it's going to be pretty good. Now, the next step is actually getting our AI to follow this path. Now, I have recorded this tutorial quite a few times and I just stumbled across my words and it was really hard to explain this. So what I did is I got an image to kind of explain this or explain what we want to do. Now, what we want to do is we want to find out where our AI car is. Then we want this AI car to look for the closest part of the path closest to it. So let's say we want a point over here. This is pretty close to the AI car. And let's say, well, what we also want to do is we want to get the front angle of the car, so the angle it is facing. Then we want to find the angle to the path, and based on that angle, we want to give it steering input. So that if this is a bigger value, we want to do bigger steering. If it's a smaller angle, we want to do little steering. If the car was on the opposite side, we'll do opposite steering, so we'll turn left. And that's the general idea. We want to get the AI's location. We want to get the AI's location and find the closest point on the path to it. Now, you kind of saw I made a random point, and I'll explain that later. But yeah, we want to find the closest point from this AI car to the path, and then find out how much steering is required based on the angle this car is away. Now to do that, we actually need to know how to get the closest point on the path for the AI. So let's go ahead and create the function that our AI will call to find the location of where it needs to drive to. So to do that, we're going to go to our content browser. We're going to go to our BP AI path, because this is where the code is going to be. And actually, I think we're going to create a blueprint interface because we're going to be calling this function a lot. So we're going to open up our content browser. We're going to right click. We're going to go to blueprint. We're going to go to blueprint interface. We're going to call this BPI underscore is AI path. So anything that is an AI path should have this blueprint interface. We're going to go ahead and double click to open it up. I'm not going to dock it or anything. And what are we going to call this function? We're going to call this function get closest location to spline. So this is the, actually I think to AI path is a bit more fitting. So it will get the closest location to the AI path. So this is the closest point on the AI path to the car. And we're going to just press enter to save that. Now, of course, to get the closest point from our car to the AI path, we actually need to know the location of our AI car. So we're going to add a new input under the details panel. We're going to set the type to vector because that's like a location storage. We're going to set this to, or call it AI location. So this is the location of our AI. And if we want to get the closest location on that AI path, it also needs to return a location. So we're going to add an output, and it is of type vector, so that's correct. But we're going to call this location to steer to. So this is the location we want to primarily drive to. We're going to compile and save, and we're not going to need this anymore. We're going to close that. And now we have to add that blueprint interface to our AI path. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the top, go to class settings, go to the bottom right under interfaces, and click on add under implemented interfaces. We're going to go ahead and type in BPI underscore AI path. And now that we have that, if we go to the bottom left under my blueprint under interfaces, we should now see our custom function. Let's go ahead and double click to open that. And this is now where we're going to put the code. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is move the return node a bit away because we want space for the code. Now, how do we get the closest location to the spline from this? Well, what we can do is we can actually drag off this AI location. We can do get distance. So get distance. Then you're going to find this get distance along spline at spline location with spline in the bracket. Now, if you click on that, now we have this. And what it will do is this will tell us how far along the spline we are based on the location of our car. Now, of course, this is not an actual valid location. So how do we get the actual valid location from this? Well, we'll drag off the return value and do a get location. And there's going to be this option, get location at distance along spline. You want to select the one with spline in the brackets, or whatever you name the spline fin, that's going to be in brackets. But you just want to select the get location at distance along spline. And now this is fully set up. This is the location closest to the AI car on the spline. We're going to connect that to the location to steer to. And one final thing, the coordinate space. So with this, we want world position coordinates. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on local, change it to world, change this from local to world. So both of these, make sure they're set to world coordinate space. I might clean up this code a bit later because there's actually a small thing I want to fix here a bit later in the video. So, but this should be good for now. We're going to compile and save. Now that that is compiled and saved, we need some way to call this in our AI car. So to do that, we're going to open up our concept browser. We're going to open up our AIC vehicle AI. We're going to delete all the set steering, set throttle, set brake code that's not needed anymore. And now we need some way to get that path in the level. For this, I'm going to use a get actor of class node. So here on begin play, I'm going to drag off the set node and do get actor of class. So now that we have that, I'm going to click on actor class to select our class. We're going to make this the BP underscore AI. And as this AI path, we're going to select that. And now this return value is the AI path. Now if we drag off this return value and promote to variable, this is now the AI path. So I'm going to name it AI path. So anything we want to do path related, we use this variable. So now we have our AI path sorted. Now we need some way to, use the information from the AI path. So now in this section, we're going to go ahead and actually make the car steer to that location. So for that, we're going to create a new function. So on the bottom left, we're going to add a new function under my blueprint. And this function, we're going to call calculate steering. So this entire function's point is to calculate how much steering we should do. Now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and, actually create the steering code. So the first thing we have to do is get the location closest to our AI car from that function we created. So in the bottom left under variables, we're going to drag in our AI path, get AI path, drag off that, and get location closest to AI path. You can use the normal one or message. I just remembered that because we used the get actor of class node, it wasn't necessary really to create the BPI in this case specifically. But I'm just going to use the message one in this case. Anyway, I'm going to drag off the calculate steering and connect that to the get closest location to AI path. Now here we have to actually feed our AI location or the location of our AI car. So in the bottom left, we're going to drag in our controlled vehicle variable, use a get, drag off that, and use a get actor location. Now we have that location, we can feed that into the AI location. And we can just kind of sort this a bit. So something like, yeah, something like this should be fine. I'm just going to select this code over here and comment it. So select all 3 of these nodes, or all 4 of these nodes. We're going to press C on our keyboard to comment that. And this I'm going to call get the closest point to the spline. So this is the closest point to the spline. And now this location to steer to, we need to do something with that. So how do we calculate the angle and then at the end the steering? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to drag off this location to steer to and type in look at. Now there's going to be this find look at a rotation. You want to use that node. And the start should be the location of your car, and the target is the place you want to steer to. So we're going to connect the location to steer to the target, and connect the get actor location to the start. And now we have a find look at rotation. So this is a rotator, but it's still not enough. We need to use a delta rotator because we need to also find the angle between the car and this angle over here. And this will finally give us the actual angle we need. So we're going to drag off this return value and use a delta. And that's going to be this delta rotator. So that's in the A value. And in the B value, we should get our actor's rotation. So we're going to go to the bottom left, drag in our controlled vehicle, and use a getter. I'm going to drag off that and do get actor rotation. We're going to drag that to the B value over there, and that should be good. Now this final value over here is the angle from which we are from the path we want to drive to. Now if I right click this and split it, then we have these three values. There's a roll, pitch, and yaw. In our case, yaw is the left and right rotation of the car, so this is the one we want to read information from. Now, the problem is with this, right, is this is an angle. This is an angle from the car to the AI path. How do we use this for, or how do we convert this to steering input? Well, there's a few ways, but I like to use a map range node. So if we drag off this yaw value and type in map range, there's going to be 2 options, clamped and unclamped. I'm going to use clamped over here. And the idea is that based on how much of an angle this is, it will convert that big value into a smaller value. So in this case, steering goes from -1 to 1. So the outrange A we're going to set to -1 and the outrange B to 1. So that is the steering ranges set up. Now you might think, okay, so we're going to make this one -180 or make this one 180 because you know that's how angles work. You can go heavily to the left or heavily to the right. But you'll be wrong because if you set this to, let's say, -90, so -90 angle, we go full speed to the left. The problem is with that, right, is that we don't want the car to start going full left when it is already having to make a big turn. We want the car to have to full turn very early so that it can actually turn in. If we set this value too high, the car is going to turn in way too slowly, and it's just going to cause a lot of problems. So for this, I actually make it -10 and set the B range to 10. So the idea is that if an angle is bigger than -10, we should give full left control. If it is smaller than that, we'll scale it down a bit. So for small angle adjustments, the car isn't going to turn heavily, but for the big turns, it's going to go full out and turn correctly. Now this return value over here is our steering input, and now we actually have to feed that to the AI. Now in this case, I'd like to do that on the event graph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the calculate steering function. I'm going to add an output. It's going to be of type float. So this is our steering input. I'm also going to call this steering input. Yeah, that's good enough. I'm going to move this return node to about here and connect the map range clamp to that. And finally connect the return node to the get closest location of AI path. So I'm going to select this bit of code here, so the find look at rotation and delta rotator, but not the map range clamp. I'm going to select that and comment this. I'm going to call this get the angle to steer to base, actually get the angle to steer to. So this is the angle actually get the angle of steering should be good enough. Get the angle of steering and go ahead and select this one and call it, what are we going to call this? I think convert angle into steering inputs should be good enough. I'm going to move this return node out a bit, move this comment block over here, move this one over here. Going to add a small reroute over there. And yeah, this should be good enough. I think this is pretty well sorted and explains everything we need. Maybe just, yeah. Okay, that's perfect. We're going to go ahead and compile and save. We're going to go back to our event graph. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the bottom left under functions and drag in our calculate steering. Then we're going to go ahead and drag the event tick to that. And this is now the calculate steering. We're going to drag off that and actually do the steering input. So to do that, we're going to go to the bottom left under variables and drag in our controlled vehicle and get that. I'm going to drag off that and do a set steering, which is that BPI we set up in the first episode. Going to click on that, and now we can set the steering. I'm going to connect the steering input and plug the execution pin in. Just going to, just going to go ahead and line that up. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay, and now we need to add a bit of throttle because, you know, the car needs to at least go a bit forward for us to be able to see the steering. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the bottom left, drag in a controlled vehicle again, use a get, drag off that, and do a set throttle. So a set throttle message. Now I'm going to set this value to something small like 0.2, because currently with the settings, our car isn't actually going to do too good of a turn at a high speed. The idea is that in the next tutorial where we do the throttle code, we're going to explain how to improve the steering code to work with this new higher speed overall. But for now, we're just going to use 0.2 throttle, move that up, and now let's go ahead and compile and save. And now if we hit play, we can see our AI car starts to turn in the path, so it's doing it really slowly. Let's see if it will do it correctly. Is he doing it? Well, wait, is he turning the wrong way? Actually, I think he is. And that kind of does make sense for some reason. Let me just test this. I'm just going to move it to the front because I kind of think I know what this is. Let's see if it is what I think it is. Else it might have been just like a fluke overall. Is he turning right? Okay, yeah, it is what I think it is. Now, remember when in this image I specifically drew a random point, right? The closest point to the car would be this, because it takes the center location of our car and gets the closest point. But there's one big problem with that. If we check the front angle of the car and check the side angle, you'll see it is 180. Which means that the game is telling the AI to go full speed to the right, which is wrong. But the moment that the AI gets in line with this road, it's going to do the same again because it's checking the closest point. We need to add a bit of offset so that instead of checking the closest point, we check a point further. Imagine it kind of like this. When you're going around the turn in a real life, you don't look right next to you while you're taking the turn. No, you're looking ahead to make the turn. Our AI needs to see ahead to know how the turn is going to look. It can't look next to it because it's going to turn way too aggressively trying to match this. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a bit of offset to the readings. So to do that, we're going to go to our BP AI path, and this is actually why I set it up this way. There's this get distance along spline at location and get location at distance along spline. The reason why I set it up this way is because if I drag off this return value, and you should follow along for this, we type in plus or add operator, and we add that, now we can add a bit more distance for AI so that it can actually take turns better. So let's make this value 500. Let's say the AI car needs to look 500 ahead. I'm going to plug that into distance. Let's compile and save, and let's see what happens now. Let's see if it works better. And now you can see it's actually turning the right direction, because previously he was actually driving the reverse of the track. So let me just press F8 to go out of my current control of my car. Let's see the AI in action. You can see he's driving along here. And because he's looking ahead, he knows, okay, yeah, there's a turn over here. I'm going to turn in a bit. And I think about here in the straight, he will go about 50 miles per hour in Unreal Engine. Now, that is pretty slow. We'll talk about in the next episode of how to make it turn faster, or how to make it go faster around the track. But for now, this tutorial is just focusing on the turning. But you can see now, he's really taking the turns well, following that pretty well. He's following that well. Going over all well here. I'm not really seeing any problems. I mean, he's following it pretty well currently. No big problems here. Let's see. I'm going to do my final goodbyes, or maybe talk about something I have planned for improving this after it finishes a lap. So it's about to finish its lap. So it's going to do the last turn over here. And it's going to go into the straight. And yeah, it did a pretty good job. It really didn't have any problems. Of course, it hits me because no collision avoidance or anything yet. But yeah, it did a pretty good job. There is one thing I might want to fix with it, or maybe want to improve with it. The idea is that the location it uses for the angle calculations is the center of the car. Now, that can fully work for this AI. It's not too much of a problem. But in real life, usually you turn with the front of your car. Well, it depends on the car, but most of the time, you turn with the front of the car. And so if we were to move the angle calculation to the front of the car, it's just going to produce a bit better results and turn a bit better at higher speeds. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. To do that, we're going to go ahead and adjust our blueprint interface to add a new function, which we'll call to get the front point of the car. So we're going to open up our content browser. We're going to open up our BPI is vehicle. We're going to add a new function. This function is going to be called, get front of car. So this will get the front point of the car. Compile and save. We're going to add an output. So this is the location of the front of the car. So add a new output. It's going to be of type vector. We're going to call this front location. It's a good name. We're going to compile and save. And now we're going to open up our AI car. So to do that, we're going to open up our content browser. Go to our content folder. Go to the vehicle templates, blueprints. We're going to open up this vehicle advanced pawn. And now we're going to add a point at the front of the car that will control the turning. So we're going to go to our viewport. So we actually don't have a car loaded. So let me just go to the mesh over here and add our vehicle mesh so we can have a guide of where to put the point. So we're going to go to the top left, add a new point over here. We're going to call this front point. Not front point. We're going to do let's do a scene. So if we type in scene, there's this scene component. So if we click on that, this is a point on our car. So I'm going to go ahead and call this front of car. So this is the front of car point. What we're going to do is we're just going to move this point to the front of the car. So something about here. Should be good. So this is the front of a car. This will be used for the rotation calculations. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and somehow send this location to our AI. To do that, we're going to go to the bottom left under the My Blueprint, go to our interfaces, and now we'll have this get front of car interface. Going to double click on that. Now we can feed in our front location. So how do we get the front point of our car? To do that, we're going to go to the top left and drag in the front of car. We're going to drag off that and use a get actor, get location. Get world location is the one we want to use. And then we just plug that into the front location, compile, save. And then finally, we just need to use this new location in our vehicle AI. So we're going to go to our AIC vehicle AI. we're going to go to calculate steering. What we're going to do is we're going to go to, instead of feeding the get actor location, we're just going to delete that and change it out with the new thing we have planned. So we're still going to keep this controlled vehicle. We're just going to drag off this and type in get front of car message. We're just going to connect that to the here over and connect the execution pin. Connect the front location to the new AI location. And finally, we're going to connect this to the start over here. Just add a reroute to clean that up a bit. Also going to move the calculate steering, expand this comment block, move this over here. And yeah, this is pretty, still pretty nice looking. So let's go ahead and compile and save. And now this should improve the steering overall. It's going to be minimal this episode, but once we get the car going at a faster speed, it should improve it overall. So let's see. He's taking the turn correctly. He turned in a bit better as well, but it's really hard to see if you're not specifically looking for that. Let's see if he handles this turn pretty well. He might try to turn in a bit earlier. That's because of the distance we fed it. This is all going to have to change. Not all of it, but we're just going to have to change that one value once we get to the throttle code. As you can see, it is still turning pretty well. Maybe just changing the distance value will improve the turning a bit. But yeah, that is it for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we'll do the throttle code and also explain how we can improve the turning code. After we do the throttle code, it's just going to be a few small code changes. But yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. Hit like if you like the video. And I'll definitely try to get the next video out way quicker than I did this one. And good night, everybody.